Agriculture. Hello, I'm Jing Ying. I'm the Regional Commercial Horticulture Educator from Cornell Corporate Extension Capital Area Agriculture and Horticulture Program. I serve ornamental growers, including cut flower growers. And today I'm going to talk about how to prepare your soil for the next season. So after a long growing season, all of us want a good break, right? However, not yet, because fall is the perfect time to start preparing your soil and improve the soil health to ensure a successful planting season next year. So in order to improve the soil health for the next season, there are a few things we could do in the fall. So in the next 1 hour, I'm going to talk about these 4 things I listed here: clearing the planting area, do a soil test, add organic matter into your soil, and maybe plant some cover crops. So the first thing you could do in the fall is to clean up your planting area, especially for the area where annuals grow. So to clean up annual field, you could remove the spent plants after the first frost in the fall. Of course, you can do that in early spring too. And you can either pull them from the base and shake off the soil, or you could cut them at the soil line to leave the roots in the soil, because the roots will decompose and put the nutrients back to the soil. And the roots can also, help improve the soil structure. If the plants had pathogen issues, then throw the dead plants in the trash to prevent the pathogens from overwintering. And if the plants are free of pathogens, you can compost them. Some annuals like cosmos might self-seed. So you can leave some spent plants with their seed heads in the field to allow for new plants next season if you want, the same plants in the same area. So for areas where perennials grow, do I need to cut down the perennial plants and do it for cleaning? It really depends. So here are a few things for you to consider if you want to do a cleanup in the fall for perennials or leave them until the spring. The first question is, do they add winter interest, right? Or do they provide food for birds? So many birds, they actually rely on the seed heads of dried perennials for food. And do they help beneficial insects in the wintertime? We know some beneficial insects, they can overwinter in the native plants as like pupae, caterpillars, or eggs, which means the plants actually, they provide shelter for these beneficial insects from their predators, such as like birds or spiders, right? And the next question you can ask yourself is, do these perennial plants need some winter protection? Some perennials are not that hardy to our growing zone, like monks or red hot poker, right? So they are more likely to survive the cold winter if you leave their tops to collect leaves and snow for insulation. However, if the plants had, pathogen issues or may harbor pests or pathogens for the next season, then cut them down, like peonies. So the next thing we could do in the fall is to have your soil tested. This is a very important thing that you could do in the fall. Compared to spring, fall is an ideal time for soil testing. It is not too wet, and it is often easier for us, to get into the field after harvest in the fall. And if your soil test report tell you, your soil pH is too low and you need to increase the soil pH, fall is the best time to apply lime, because it takes a few months for the lime to work. And also fall, provides more time for any adjustment. So there are many commercial soil testing labs out there. Here are a few labs that I have used. They're all great. But when you choose whatever lab you want to use, make sure to use the same lab every time when you need a soil test. When you take a soil sample, there are a few tools you could use, such as a soil probe, an auger, a shovel, or a spade. If you use a shovel or a spade, make sure to use the center 1-inch soil core, not the entire soil slide. And you need to randomly, take 15 to 20 samples, and then mix them in a clean plastic bucket, and subsample a pint or 2 cups of soil for testing. If you have a big field, you can divide the field into a few smaller areas based on the factors like soil type, crop performance, and some other factors. Then in each area, you do a zigzag pattern and randomly take about 15 to 20 samples in each area and then mix them together. And then subsample, a pint of soil. And if you have high tunnels, I would suggest you do like one sample for each high tunnel. So do we need to dry the samples before sending them to the lab? It really depends on the labs. Some do and some don't. So please call them and make sure, if they want you to dry your samples or not. If they do want you to dry the samples first, then spread the soil out on a paper, 1-inch thick, and air dry it for like 24 hours before you mail your soil sample to the lab. So here is an example for the soil test reports from Agri1. So the soil test tells us the macro and micronutrient levels in the soil, like the levels are low or very low or medium or high or very high, right? So the medium means it is sufficient for one season. It also tells us the soil pH, organic matter level, and also provides some like liming and fertilization recommendations. So for this type of soil test, I usually call it routine test. You could have it done once every 2 years. So this type of routine soil testing, can tell us, can provide us with a better idea of chemical properties of the soil health. So it's important. It's good to know, right? But every time you take a soil sample or do a soil test, make sure to sample at the same time of the year. Like if you usually do it in mid or the end of October, they always do it in mid or the end of October, and sample to the same depth. You want to make sure to sample the soil core to as deep as go deep to like 6 to 8 inches deep. So that is the root zone. And around the same test, always use the same lab because different labs use different methods to do the test. So you want to make sure to use the same lab so you can compare those test results from year to year, right? And also keep track of fertilizer applications and plants growth. So again, this is the chemical test of your soil, can give us a better idea of the chemical properties of your soil health. So here, I think I need to quickly talk about soil health. So soil health actually is not just chemical properties. It also includes physical properties and biological properties. And there is a soil health test. So Cornell has a soil health lab, and we can send a soil sample to Cornell Soil Health Lab, and they can do the soil health test for us. Usually, for one soil health test, you will need about 4 cups of soil. But the thing is, soil health won't change that quickly, so you don't have to do it like every other year or every year. You could do it like every 5 years. And the soil health test is also more expensive than those soil routine tests. One soil routine test is about it's about $18 to $20 per sample. But for soil health test, it's about $230 to $250 per sample. So a soil health test assesses the overall condition of the soil and its ability to support plant growth, right? So it includes the three types of properties of soil health. The physical test evaluates like soil texture, structure, hardness, and water holding capacity. And the biological tests assess like organic matter level and the soil microbial activities. And I think this is the most important part of the soil health. And the chemical test is like the routine test. You know, they measure the soil pH and the nutrient levels in the soil. So the next very important thing we could do in the fall is to add organic matter into the soil. So we always talk about organic matter. Then what is organic matter, right? Organic matter is made up of living, dead, and decomposing plant materials, small animals, and microorganisms. So adding organic matter can really improve all three properties of your soil health. So these all three properties, you know, the physical, the biological, and the chemical properties, they're all connected to each other. You know, you improve the soil biological properties, you actually can also help improve the physical property and chemical property. So the reason why organic matter is so powerful is because it has the biological magic, right? So it can hold water and the nutrients very well. It can also build soil structure with its biological glue. And it can also provide food to soil organisms. So very, very important. So now let's take a close look at the organic matter. Organic matter has three components: the living, the active, the stable. So first, the living, right? The living is everything that is alive in the soil, such as, you know, fungus, nematodes, microorganisms, small animals, you know, all of these living things in the soil. And there are so many living things in the soil. So when we hold a handful of soil, probably 50% of that is alive. So that means soil can be considered alive, right? We want a live soil. We don't want a dead soil. Then the active. So the active, this component is the plant materials that are just dead and being actively decomposed. This is a very important component in organic matter because it provides nutrients slowly to the plant. And also it provides food to the soil organisms, right? And it also acts like, you know, the biological glue binding the soil aggregates together to make our soil more stable. So you won't have soil erosion issues, especially in the spring. So this is very important. The next component is the stable. So this is organic matter that has been broken down and not much left for nutrients. Sometimes we call it humus. You probably heard the term humus, right? So that is the stable component in organic matter. So although there's not much nutrients left in the stable component, but it can still provide habitats for microorganisms to live. So that is still very good, right? It also can improve the soil structure. So this is also the important part. So now we have talked about how important organic matter is for your soil health. Then the next question is how to build up soil organic matter. the best and the quickest way to build up organic matter in the soil is to add manure and compost into the soil. There are, because like manure and compost, they are great because there are so much living organisms in it. We talk about the living component in organic matter, right? So that is the living component is so big in manure and compost. Mulch is also a way to add organic matter to the soil, like like grass clippings, wood chips, straws, leaves, right? They're also good. However, one thing is there are not as many living organisms in mulch as manure and compost. Here, I want to mention another, great type of organic matter that you could put in your soil. I'm not sure if you know what that is. So this is mushroom production. So the another great type of organic matter I'm going to talk about now is the waste mushroom substrate, or sometimes it's called spent mushroom substrate. So it is made from a variety of materials such as like manures, wheat straw, corn cobs, feather meal, peanut meal, peat moss, and lime. So after the mushroom is harvested, right, the substrate still has some nutrients available in it. Also, another nice thing is it also has so much mycelium in it. So it can introduce and support beneficial microbes into the soil. And since it's the waste for mushroom growers, many of the mushroom growers actually they are willing to sell it at a like lower price or even free. And another way to build up organic matter in the soil, not really adding the organic matter into the soil, is the practice of no-till or minimum till, right? So tilling can decrease residue particle size and increase the amount of air going into the soil. And that will increase the rate of organic matter, the rate, the rate of organic matter breaking down. So that means, if the more you till, the less organic matter you will have in your soil. And of course, another great way to add organic matter into the soil is to grow cover crops. And I'm going to spend lots of time to talk about cover crops. So cover crops sometimes are also called green manures, right? There are mainly three types of cover crops: legumes, grasses, and brassicas. So legumes can fix nitrogen and add more nitrogen into the soil. And the non-legumes can scavenge nutrients, especially nitrogen from the soil. Then, after we terminate these non-legumes, and when it's decomposing, it will recycle the nitrogen back to the soil. So that is great, right? And we can plant cover crops before, during, or after a main crops. So from this picture, we can see for many cover crops, they have like massive roots. That is great. The root system is huge, and there are so many fine roots, and these fine roots can go very deep and very far. That is great. And these massive roots are great organic matter for soil. Also, these roots are very fine, right? And the fine roots first can break down compacted soil. So if you have clay soil, these roots will work very well to break down your clay particles in your soil. And also, the nitrogen level nitrogen level tend to be higher in finer roots. So you can imagine, when these fine roots are being decomposed, they will put back lots of nitrogen to the soil. So we did a 2-year cover crop trial on 5 cut flower farms in the capital region of New York State from 2023 to 2025. And the project was funded by New York Farm Viability Institute. The reason why we did this project was to answer a few questions. So the typical cut flower growing season in upstate New York is from late April to late September or even October. But the best time to plant winter cover crops is mid-August. So the question is, would winter cover crops still be able to suppress weeds and improve soil health when being planted so late, in late fall? Also, summer annual weeds is always a big challenge for cut flower production, right? So we want to see, we want to find out, would summer cover crops be able to suppress weeds and improve soil health when grown together with the cut flowers? And what summer cover crop species will serve better for this purpose without competing for water and nutrients with cut flowers? So we did the trials on 5 small-scale cut flower farms in eastern New York in the capital region. 4 of them rely on landscaping fabric for weed control. And one of them is a sunflower U-pick farm. The growing zone in the capital region of New York State is zone 5 or zone 6. So we did a soil health test for each farm before the project started, and found out a few constraints on the soil health on each farm. The main constraints include high surface hardness, surface and subsurface hardness. So the soil was compacted, right? And low soil microbial activities and low aggregate stability. So that means the soil structure was poor. So that means, that the farm tend to have soil erosion in the springtime. And some other constraints include low organic matter. It is also a big thing. So based on the soil health constraints we found out, we decided to try several winter cover crops. So in the first year of winter cover crop trial, we had 4 groups. The first group was winter cereal rye and hairy vetch. So we combined the grass and the legume together. The reason why we do that was because, if you grow grass and wait until the grass is up matured, then the carbon to nitrogen level, the carbon to nitrogen ratio in that will be high. That means when it's being decomposed, it will use up the nitrogen from your soil. And legume can actually fix nitrogen and put more nitrogen into your soil. So that is why we combine the grass and the legume together. And group 2 was winter pea and oats. Group 3 was annual ryegrass and hairy vetch. So these are all the hardy winter cover crops, and most of them can survive the cold winter in upstate New York. And the 4th group was control, so no cover crops were planted in that group. So we planted 2 rounds. The first round was the end of September. So again, we talked about the best time to plant winter cover crops is actually mid-August. So the cover crops can have like can be big enough for the first frost. Can be big enough by the first frost arrives. So we planted the first round at the end of September. We broadcasted the cover crop seeds with a long seed spreader, and we planted the cover crops in the growing rows. You can see the pictures here. And the second round we planted was mid to late October. And at that time, a winter cereal rye was the only option because it's already very late. And this is how the cover crops looked like at the end of November. So they germinated pretty fast after we planted, and then because they're hardy enough, so they um, kept growing, and this is how they looked like the end of November. And 3 of the 5 farms had a deer issue. You can see here is the deer footprint, right? So the deer came and ate all the oats. Deer love oats so much. And also another problem is, the deer also stepped on the newly established cover crops and killed those cover crops. So this is how the cover crops looked like after a winter, at the beginning of March. We can see in this control picture, these green things are summer annual wheat. So the summer annual wheat had already started to germinate. Actually, they had already germinated at the beginning of March. And so in some of these pictures, we can see the oats. Oats already got winter killed. This is how the cover crops looked like in mid-April. Oats had already winter killed. And the cereal rye was the cereal rye that was planted in late October was about 1 foot tall, and the cover crops that were planted in late September was about 1.5 foot tall. And you can see this picture here. It used to be winter pea and oats, but since oats were already winter killed, so now it only had a pea in those plots, and you can see the weeds started to grow in between the peas. So in mid-May, cover crops were about 3 to 4 feet tall. So for this winter cover crop trial, severe deer damage was observed on actually 2 farms, and winter cover crops overwintered, except the oats. And in mid-May, winter cereal rye and hairy vetch, they started to bloom. Hairy vetch created a nice thick mat to suppress the summer annual wheat. Okay, so in the spring, right? The next thing is to terminate the cover crops. So we tried a few ways to terminate the cover crops. In early April, we needed to terminate the cereal rye that was planted in October. And the rye was still very small. And we did not want to use herbicides. So we terminated them by killing the root crown with a garden hoe. And we also tried topping without hoeing, so we put the silage tarp directly on the winter cereal rye. And it did not work very well. You can see the picture here. So after 2 weeks, you can see the cereal rye got a little yellowy, but they were still there, and they were still alive. And we also tried, in mid-May, yes. So in mid-May, we also tried to terminate the cover crop by crimping. I built this crimper. So, you crimp at the base of the cover crops trying to terminate it, but it did not really work very well. So it only injured the base of the cover crops, but the cover crops were very tough. So it actually recovered from the injury. And another thing we tried was to weed whack it, to cut the cover crop down in mid-May. So that actually worked because in mid-May, the winter cereal rye and hairy vetch, all annual ryegrass, they were pollinating, they were blooming and pollinating. So that is the window that you can cut them down and they tend not to come back. So if you cut them down too early, for example, in early April, right, when they were still actively growing, if you want to cut them down at that time, they will come back. But again, when you cut them down, you target that window of pollinating, you cut them down, they tend not to come back. And for the cover crops on the sunflower farm, we actually mold it. So we molded the cover crops when they were pollinating. And also we laid the cover crop clippings on the field in order to suppress weeds. And in June, the grower actually planted the sunflower seeds through the cover crop mulch with a corn planter. You can see in July the 2nd, the beginning of July, the sunflower seeds had germinated. And here, you can see there are lots of weeds here. That is the control plot. So in the sunflower farm, we use the cover crop clippings for weed suppression. These pictures were taken in mid-July, and you can see with the cover crop clippings, the sunflower seedlings, they were much bigger than the sunflower seedlings in the control plot. So these are all the summer annual weeds the grower had, and you can see the sunflower seedlings were very small, even hard to find among the weeds. So we also did a summer cover crop trial in 2024. So our plan was to use summer cover crops to suppress weeds in the pathway between the rows. So we tried beers and clover because beers and clover, they can establish and grow very fast. So we hoped the beers and clover could outcompete the summer annual weeds. For the pathway, since the pathway is so narrow, it's very hard to mow. So we want the cover crops, we don't want the cover crops to grow too tall. And also we want them to establish and grow fast. So there are actually not many options out there. And we chose to try beers and clover because, they don't grow very tall and they fix nitrogen into the soil. So we hoped, they will add more nitrogen into the soil to help the main crop. So we planted these beers and clover in April. However, yes, they established and grow fast, but was not fast enough to outcompete summer annual weeds. So this trial actually failed. Oh, and another reason we chose to use beers and clover was because they're annual and they can be winter killed. So if the growers did not like, beers and clover, it would not be a problem for the next year. So we have learned a few lessons from the first year of the cover crop trial. First, on a small scale, broadcast seeding rate should be much higher than the recommended seeding rate for large scales, especially if a grower has year or bird pressure. So when you plant cover crops, you always ask you will ask what is the seeding rate you want to use, and then you find out the seeding rate from the books or from internet. How many pounds per acre. But for small scale cauliflower growers, we don't have acres of land. So then you want to do a conversion, like convert the number from pounds per acre to how many grams per 100 or 1,000 square feet, right? And then you did the correct conversion and you got a number. But I would suggest not using that number. Do it much higher than that number, especially if you have deer or bird issues. And if you had narrow pathways, between the crop rows, instead of planting summer crops in early spring, it might be better to plant winter cover crops in both rows and pathways, and use the terminated winter cover crops or cover crop clippings in the pathways as mulch for weed suppression. And another lesson we learned was when planting winter cover crops in the fall, adding some compost into the soil before sowing the seed might be helpful for increase the size and the amount of biomass of cover crops. So if you want to use the cover crop clippings for mulching, right, to suppress weeds, you want the mulch to be thick enough. That means you want to get enough biomass from these cover crops. But at the end of the season, if you did not have enough nutrients in the soil, you may not get enough biomass from the cover crops. Another thing is, you might end your production season in October. But if you have a few rows where you did your last harvest early, you did your last harvest maybe in mid-August, and you did not have any other planting plans for those rows, plant cover crops there, instead of letting the weeds thrive there. So the top two pictures, so the grower harvested that row in early August. And so in mid-August, we planted a combination of oats, forage radish, and a crimson clover there. The reason why we used the forage radish there was because the grower had compacted soil. And the below two pictures, again, that grower, the last harvest in those rows in August, and then we planted the oats and a crimson clover there. And if you have an area where you don't want to grow anything there for a season, for some reason, then grow cover crops. So for this grower, he had a piece of land where the soil condition was very, very poor, and nothing can grow there. And he almost want to give up on that field. So we planted one entire season of cover crops. We did a combination of Sudan grass, pearl millet, field pea, white mustard, and crimson clover. And that we planted in May, early May. And then, so that's how it looks like. They look like at the beginning of September. And at the end of October, these cover crops were already winter killed. So he actually did not need to, terminate by himself. And and over the winter in March 2025, you can see these dead cover crop materials already laid down in the field by the snow and rain, right? And you can see it created actually a thick mulch on the field. And from this picture, you can see there's a natural line. So here's the field with cover crops, and this is the field without cover crops. And you can see actually that there are some green things in that field, that is the summer annual wheat that had already germinated and started to grow. So our original plan for that grower was to plant sunflower seeds through the cover crop mulch with a no-till drill. So we want to use this cover crop mulch, to suppress some annual weed. However, unfortunately, we were not able to rent a no-till drill. So the grower ended up tilling these dead cover crops in the soil. So you can see the picture here. So he tilled those dead cover crop materials in the soil. And you can see this is the field without cover crops, and this is the field with cover crops. It's actually very clearly for our naked eyes to see how much organic matter was added to the soil. However, I want to mention one thing here is because those cover crops, those grasses were already matured in the last season. So the carbon to nitrogen ratio was high for those grasses. And when you till those cover crop materials in the soil, when it's decomposing, it will use the nitrogen in your soil. So that means you want to watch your main crops, and maybe you will need to add some nitrogen into the field later on. So we did a soil health test before the project started, and we also did a we did a soil health test again after growing cover crops for a season. Actually, for almost two. Yes, for a season. So we had this compare, before and after. So we can see for this grower, I just randomly picked one. Before cover crop planted, this grower had some soil aggregation issues, right? And also the biological property of the soil was not that great. And after planting cover crops, we can see the soil aggregation was highly improved. So the rating was from 17 to 82. That was great. And for the biological properties, for the organic matter and active carbon. So the active carbon is the active component in organic matter. So that is very important. Actually, the most important component in organic matter. That's also largely improved. And also for this predicted soil protein. So the predicted soil protein indicates the pool of organically bound nitrogen in the soil organic matter. So that is the organic, so that is the nitrogen that will be available to your plants. You can see that rating is also largely improved. So that means growing cover crops in the field did improve the soil health. So we have been talking about cover crops, and they're so great. And I will highly suggest that you try the cover crops too. So now the next question is, there are so many cover crop species out there. What cover crops should I try? So here are a few questions for you to think about it. The first is, what are your purposes of growing cover crops? Do you want to improve the soil organic matter, or you want to increase the soil aggregation, or add more nitrogen into the soil, or outcompete some annual weeds, or prevent spring soil erosion? So these are the questions you will need to answer. What are your purposes of growing cover crops? And the next question is, when do you want to grow cover crops? right? Do you want to grow cover crops after the end of the season? Or do you want to grow them during the summertime between main crops, right? And how long do you want the cover crops to grow? You want them to grow over the winter or a few weeks during the summertime? And also, what are your growing conditions? Like, do you have full sun for the cover crops? Or how about soil drainage, soil pH, right? So these are all the questions you will need to answer, and it will help you choose what kind of summer cover. It will help you to choose what kind of cover crops you want to try. And this is a great tool that can help you select what cover crops you could try. This is a website. So you go to this website, it will ask you a few questions that I just asked and even more questions for you. And you will need to answer these questions. And it will provide you with a list of cover crops that you might, it will provide you with a list of cover crops that might be good options for you. So this is all I have for today, and thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.